my history goes back to financial markets for 40 years now, 45 years, and you always look for mispricing in the market.
Fits under a bigger policy of President Bukele, which is economic liberty.
Right. You already have the migration numbers are already approaching reverse migration. They're very close now, where you get more people are fleeing.
The strong men create the good times. I think we're still we're at that phase where it's strong men creating good times, and the bad times, like 4 people.
Let's hear go boomers, boomers for Bitcoin.
Sorry, I have to do some press soon with Ambassador Milena Mayorga, who used to be Miss Universe El Salvador. And every time I've ever been in the press and I dress like a Bitcoiner and then she dresses like she does, I'm like, I see the photos in the press and I'm like, oh my God, maybe I need to wear a dress next time. That's why I'm wearing a dress at a Bitcoin conference.
I've got better legs than both those women now. I try to get into Miss Universe, and apparently I am eligible. But they said it was unfair given my former life as a Dior leg model. So.
Well, it is a thrill to be here with you guys. This is my first time in El Salvador, and the title of our talk here is Bitcoin, the greatest rebrand in history. And so there's a lot to talk about.
El Salvador, the greatest rebrand.
El Salvador, correct. El Salvador.
Same thing, synonymous.
Yes,
right?
yes, synonymous. I love your hat, by the way. So, obviously, there's so much going on here in person, rebranding, change, and then obviously bonds. El Salvador's bonds were recently upgraded in the last couple days here.
Yesterday.
Yesterday,
Last night.
right. So, right?
Told you so.
So from the bottom up, we're seeing this rebranding for Bitcoin, for El Salvador, for Bukele, for everything here. So what are you guys most excited about?
Well, I'm actually the one that coined that phrase that El Salvador has, that President Bukele is responsible for the greatest rebrand in history. There's so many Bitcoin babies around. You know, I know President Bukele just had a baby at 4:44 this morning. Maybe that's Amina. But the greatest rebrand in history, of course, just 4 or 5 years ago, this was considered the homicide capital of the world, the most dangerous place to be. 5 years later, 4 years later, it's the place everybody wants to be, right? And in terms of, that's because of one person, right? That's President Bukele, and he's changed the fate, the history of this country. The future is bright. Now, in terms of the title of this conference, Adopting Bitcoin, what Max and I focus on and what we've focused on for the past 2 years for President Bukele is our most important adoption metric is how many great individuals, Bitcoiners, builders, and Bitcoin companies are adopting El Salvador. So that's the #1 metric that we look at because we're building Renaissance 2.0. That includes everything. We want to be Florence. We want to be Singapore. We want to be, you know, the next Silicon Valley. And we're all of that by attracting the best and the brightest.
Yeah, I think that this idea of approaching this startup nation from a perspective of branding is helpful to get everybody on the same page. You know, what we do over the past year and a half to 2 years, of course, is to push the idea of Bitcoin maximalism and to create a moat or a barrier to keep the altcoins, shitcoins out. And the calculation there, the calculation there is that any possible incremental gain that might occur by entertaining a shitcoin is dwarfed by focusing on Bitcoin and the brand value that comes with Bitcoin. So this is embraced by the president, who's a genius. He's a political genius, and I think the President Bukele and Bitcoin go well together. They complement each other in an extraordinary way. And so it just is, we're getting, as they say, we're just getting started.
So obviously, we all believe and think and hope that Bitcoin has reached escape velocity. Do you think El Salvador and the movement here, the innovation coming, as you were saying, do you think that El Salvador has already reached escape velocity? And if not, where do you think we hit that?
We were just talking about this with the team at Bitfinex, is that, in fact, we're kind of like a 2011 Bitcoin. And, Max spoke at the first Bitcoin conference ever, which was in Prague, and it's like that. That's what El Salvador is like, so we're still very early. These are the days, and, there was a period of time, especially like 2017, 2018, 2019, and we'd go to Bitcoin conferences, and there was a huge flood of new people in, and everybody was like, oh my God, what was it like to be in 2011 Bitcoin? It seems like a different world. Well, you're going to have the same thing in like 5 years from now. People are like, oh my God, you were in El Salvador in 2023. What was it like then? So I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. My history goes back to financial markets for 40 years now, 45 years. And you always look for mispricing in the markets. And it's very rare you find something like El Salvador that the market is so incredibly underpriced. I think the rating agencies are now catching on. They just raised the rating. The bond market has been extraordinary for El Salvador. It's the best performing emerging market. That's institutional money. Now we have what's called the smart money. This is the folks who are going to come in and start developing more seriously the infrastructure and the tourism and things like that. And then a year from now, we're going to have a line at LaGuardia trying to get on a plane to escape the shithole that is the United States and fleeing, right? We already have the migration numbers are already approaching reverse migration. They're very close now, where you get more people are fleeing the U.S. to El Salvador than vice versa. And so this is, once that flips, I think that's escape velocity. That's how I would define it.
I would also say that the rating, we were upgraded, El Salvador was upgraded yesterday by the S&P, but their rating is still total bullshit, and everybody in this room knows that. Like, there's no way this fucking country is not investment grade. We're all here investing and we're building because we believe it's investment grade. So it's bullshit, that rating agency. See, somebody laugh.
So investing in El Salvador, you mentioned that. What is the best way for Bitcoiners to invest in the country, invest in the people? Obviously, everything Bitcoin, everything pro-Bitcoin, but what are you seeing being here, living in here? Okay, we have legal tender. What's the next step? What's the way that entrepreneurs and Bitcoin-focused entrepreneurs can invest in this country and accelerate that?
We're building Renaissance 2.0, and that means everything. We need everything. We need, like I said, the best individuals, the best builders, the best companies, the best artists, the best thinkers, doers, like beers. We don't want plunderers. We've locked them all up. We've kicked them out of the country. We don't have the corrupt anymore. All those shitcoiners can go somewhere else, one of the, like Puerto Rico or something. We don't need them here. Right? So you just need to invest your time and your energy, and that includes just simply don't trust, verify. Because if you're all of you here are verifying for a fact that you see what's in front of you and what you're experiencing here in El Salvador. A lot of people outside El Salvador just read the press or read online FUD, and they think it's, that's all the investment they put into thinking whether or not they want to move there. They're like, no, I'm going to trust the mainstream media, and I'm not going to move there or visit there. So just invest your time and energy, and once you come here, I've seen quite a few people, like Lena, she came here to visit and now she's staying. Like, that's generally what happens. A lot of people come to visit and they never leave.
Yeah, I think the new Statue of Liberty is a volcano in El Salvador. This has become the home of the brave, land of the free, or is it land of the free, home of the brave? I've forgotten what's going on over there. That landmass wedged between Canada and Mexico, I forget sometimes. But this is really, the best investment is to come here. And, we've been for John over at Me Premier Bitcoin, for example, he came here, and Me Premier Bitcoin is absolutely unbelievable. And he really built that from scratch. And that's the kind of opportunity anybody who comes here who's entrepreneurial has a good idea. And the country needs everything across the board. You know, anything you do, they want, they need, and that's the message. And I'll say something else about living in El Salvador is that, as was explained to me once by somebody, you know, if you go to Japan or you move to Japan, you never become Japanese. If you move to France, you really never become French. If you go to the US, there's a melting pot and you can become American. It's similar here in El Salvador. People love everyone moving here and they embrace you as family. You become Salvadoran the second you eat your first pupusa.
Has that been your favorite thing about moving here, is not just seeing Bitcoin adoption, but being a part of the community and seeing that the whole nation support you, or all the Bitcoiners here support you?
Yeah, it's one of the most important things. Like I said, the metric that we look at is the number of Bitcoiners adopting El Salvador, and that's how we gauge whether or not we're succeeding in what we're doing. Because all of the work we're doing, whether it's the education projects, whether it's providing the very simple, clear laws and regulations, or whether it's having the Bitcoin office, as John Dennehy pointed out, like the fact that we have a Bitcoin office and you can call and we can hear people's concerns. So the metric we look at is the number of companies moving here, and I know it's working, and because I see the companies coming. I know Fold and Strike, for example, just announced they're moving here. We're going to have another few rounds of big announcements over the next few months of people coming here. I just heard that, there was a gathering of some Bitcoin companies somewhere in the United States, and there was a half-day discussion with this gathering of Bitcoiners that what is their El Salvador plan? So that's what we want, is you need an El Salvador plan if you're want to be taken seriously in the Bitcoin space. And that's a sign of that we're succeeding in what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I would pretty much concur with that.
That's how well I've trained him. That's our dinner conversation all night long. He just says, I pretty much concur with you.
So with the embassy, with the regulatory clarity and everything else coming for Bitcoin in the US with the ETF and everything of that sort, do you think that that's going to have a major impact here in the narrative for obviously Bitcoin, but then also, El Salvador did do the right thing and they did adopt this? Or do you think it's irrelevant? Do you think that El Salvador needs the West to change your opinion? He'll just keep marching forward.
Well, obviously President Bukele is a bit like a honey badger. He don't give a fuck, like whatever they want to do. But we always believed for quite a long time now, Bitcoin is money, everything else is a shitcoin or a security, we'll call it, right? But the U.S. was saying that, the regulators were saying that over and over and over, and all these people keep on demanding regulatory clarity, and it's like, they're fucking telling you, like, it's a shitcoin, it's a scam, they know it, like, everybody knows it. So we just okay, let's just put it down on paper, because we realized, remember, the U.S., the IMF, all these international rating agencies, big banks were saying El Salvador is going to fail. They're adopting Bitcoin. It's going to be a disaster, collapse, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what collapsed? All of those highly regulated entities out of New York City, which is triply regulated inside the U.S. So you had all of those, you had SBF, you had Celsius, you had BlockFi, you had all that stuff happen in the U.S. It didn't happen here for a reason, because we were here and we kept this Bitcoin country.
Yeah, I think it's becoming an irresistibly attractive place to come and to move. The Bitcoin aesthetic and the Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin philosophy at the core of the Bitcoin phenomenon includes many sociological and even psychological aspects. And I don't think it's a coincidence that after making Bitcoin legal tender, the country then went on a program to make El Salvador the most secure country in the hemisphere, because Bitcoin is a money that is unconfiscatable. And that means that you're demonetizing violence and you're intolerant of violence. It's the birth of a new economy that favors peace, peaceful exchange. Because if you cannot coerce or violently extract wealth from somebody's property, you have to come into the conversation with something that the other person wants. And so that filters throughout the entire country. And that's part of the phenomenon that's going to be bringing a lot of people that might not be interested in Bitcoin, but they want to start a family. And they want to start a family in a safe place. So they'll come to El Salvador. So it has ancillary impacts throughout the entire matrix of society.
Yeah, I mean, those are classical, like, liberal sort of ideas of enlightened ideas, right? That first, Bitcoin policy fits under a bigger policy of President Bukele, which is economic liberty. So first it was economic liberty, and then he introduced Bitcoin. And then, of course, you need to secure the blessings of liberty, right? What good is liberty for a few people when everybody has the God-given right to it? You're born with that, right? So this is like the foundational sort of ideas of Western society. And we've totally forgotten that, like, a lot of places you see in the U.S., I mean, we won't go too much into it, you see the plunder, the bizarre disintegration, as President Bukele pointed out in his interview with Tucker Carlson, like, it's by design almost, right? So we're by design creating the opposite here. We're intentionally, with intent, like we're building an enlightened society where life, liberty, and property are protected.
Do you think that fire is catching steam elsewhere in Latin America? So obviously, there are many other nations, not just El Salvador, but do you think that they're seeing, oh wait, this is working, rebranding of El Salvador, more people are coming and more people moving there. Do you think that this passion for freedom is spreading? Like, do you see that happening, or is it still taking time elsewhere outside of the country?
Yeah, it's definitely catching a bid, in other countries in the region and around the world. Obviously in Argentina, you have a candidate who's running for president who's very Bitcoin literate, and in the ethos of Bitcoin and the idea of separating money from state, which is one of the core pieces of what makes Bitcoin so appealing, is that for the first time in history you have separated money from state and you create individual sovereignty, and this is incredibly appealing. So it's the fact that it's working here is certainly a shining example. We are the shining city on the hill. We are Camelot. But President Bukele is, as I say, it's John F. Kennedy meets Steve Jobs, and the results speak for themselves. The GDP here is going to double in the next 5 to 6 years, I predict, as well as being debt-free by 2030.
Yeah. I think obviously President Bukele is the most popular leader across Latin America, and every country wants him as their leader. But I think also, as Max mentioned, he's a genius. So everybody, like, you stand in front of the Mona Lisa and you're like, anybody could do that. I'm like, duh, like I'm a Da Vinci, right? Or everybody thinks they're Michelangelo. President Bukele is like that. He makes it look easy, but it's a lot of not only hard work, but you have to be born a leader like that, right? Like, you have to be able to, the strength of character to withstand all of that global media onslaught. Like, Max and I were like the only two Bitcoiners around him, and it was just like, it was like scary. Like, it was like, nerve-wracking for somebody like myself, because I'm not a born leader like him, right? So, you're being this onslaught of, like, you guys are going to fail. This is humiliating. You're going to humiliate your entire country. This is a disaster. And you're like, I hope this works. I'm thinking that. But he's just, like, so confident and able to, just lead to this point, like, everything is I told you so, because he had the vision and he went there. What he always says is, like, where El Salvador is going is to the place we want to be. So, he wanted to be there, and he took everybody along with him. And it's not going to be as easy for everybody else. Like, all these people, it's like a cargo cult, how they, like, think, well, he adopted Bitcoin and that's going to make me popular like he was. But it takes a lot more than that. It's not just like Bitcoin is it, and like it's everything. It's all of it's the courage, it's the determination, it's the fortitude, it's the strength of character, and most people don't have that.
Now, Max, you said that you believe GDP for El Salvador double 5 years, debt-free by 2030. Obviously, the halving is coming up. Obviously, it's irrelevant in the bigger picture. El Salvador's got the momentum; they're going, but obviously, we have the halving coming up, big event. Do you think that that new cycle is going to bring so many more of the El Salvadorans that are Bitcoin curious but still trying to figure it out? Do you think that we're about to have a massive wave of people on the ground figuring this out, meeting those adoption metrics, and actually coming in as a result of the halving or any other catalyst?
Bitcoin is incredible, and it's incredibly important, which is why it means a lot that you're watching this video and you're taking the time. I do this because I believe it is a really, really important innovation that we've discovered a way to not have a single point of failure at global base layer money. See, fiat money, political currency units, and gold, all other forms of money up to this point in history have had a single point of failure. This has been the largest monetary problem in human history for the last 4,000 years. And now we have Bitcoin, and Bitcoin solves that single point of failure problem. And now, therefore, we have a new single point of failure problem, and that is how do we custody and store that Bitcoin properly for the long term in a safe and secure way that brings peace of mind. That's why I work at the Bitcoin Advisor. If you were to be hit by a bus, does your spouse, do your kids, do your loved ones and beneficiaries know how to access your Bitcoin? Do you have a proper self-custody storage method to where there is no single point of failure? Not from yourself, not from your seed device, not from where your seed phrase is stored. Have you considered these questions? Have you gotten your UTXOs managed? Do you have jurisdictional arbitrage? Have you considered all the trust, taxes, and estate planning requirements that are associated with becoming a high net worth person? Because if you are buying Bitcoin right now, you are going to become a high net worth person. Are you prepared for the amount of Bitcoin you have to skyrocket in value 2x, 5x, 10x, or 100x eventually? That's the time horizon you should have, and so you need to be preparing today for that future. How are you going to custody your Bitcoin? How are you going to leave that Bitcoin for your future generations? Because after all, that's what we do this for, right? You're buying Bitcoin for your kids. You're buying it for your grandkids. So I highly recommend you start thinking in those long-term time periods now, because companies are coming, charities are coming, high net worth individuals are coming, and all of them are going to realize that having an allocation to a multi-sig collateral custody vault is going to be something that is of serious consideration for them. So once you understand Bitcoin is a beautiful innovation for not having a single point of failure at the base layer currency, now you have to start seriously considering, how do I have my custody stored where there is no single point of failure? Okay, if you want to learn more about that, please click the link in the description. I have dozens of pages of free educational content for you and videos. I'm happy to help in that free way. And then if you want individual help, I'm also happy to help you join the Bitcoin Advisor, where you can be an ongoing client. You can become one of my clients, and I'd be happy to help you in the years to come to make sure your Bitcoin's protected, to where no matter what, no matter if thieves or scammers or spammers or yourself or your family member or whoever, no matter whether it's due to theft or loss, misallocation, misplacement, or just other mistakes, I'm happy to help you and be that voice of reason in the coming years ahead. So click the link in the description. I'd be happy to help. Check it out. Thanks.
New cycle is going to bring so many more of the El Salvadorans that are Bitcoin curious but still trying to figure it out. Do you think that we're about to have a massive wave of people on the ground figuring this out, meeting those adoption metrics, and actually coming in as a result of the halving or any other catalyst?
Definitely. You know, as far as adoption goes, another way I look at adoption is awareness. You know, awareness is the beginning of adoption. And in this country, you've got 100% awareness of Bitcoin. So that's really 100% beginning to adopt Bitcoin. And it's not about the actual use at the pupuseria, which of course is growing quite rapidly, but the fact that everyone is aware of Bitcoin and starts to think about separating money from state, starts to think about perfect money, starts to think about having absolutely scarce, perfect money. This is begins to create a lot of attraction for people around the world who are looking around, and they're not really happy. We just got a delegation from, I guess I can speak other details, you know, we got a delegation from Santa Monica, California, who arrived, and they talked to us about the fact that they are disheartened. They look around and they see the human condition is deteriorating. You know, what can they do to be more like El Salvador? Now, I spent a lot of years in California. I spent a lot of years in Santa Monica. I started a company in Santa Monica. So to have this delegation come from Santa Monica into El Salvador and ask for help, how can we be more like you guys? How can we restore optimism? How can we get rid of this institutionalized cynicism that has become the political sphere in the United States. So that tells you, I think, where we are in the cycle. And we're about to experience an enormous amount of influx of folks coming into the country and bringing their talent, and it's going to be a fantastic next 5-10 years.
I think it's also important to point out that El Salvador we have a very, very solid foundation, like for that launch up. And it's really important to note that during this, the bear market has been great for us because it kept all the shitcoiners out. It made our jobs easier. And Bitcoiners don't ever give a fuck about bear markets, right? That's always when the best memes come out. So we're all having fun, right? And we're builders, so we're building. The shitcoiners run away because there's nothing to plunder. They're just looking to scam people, desperate with FOMO. But it's important to note, like this conference put together by Galloy and Bitfinex, right? Blink and Bitfinex, and Galloy were the first Bitcoin Beach wallet, were some of the first builders here, building very early in 2019, 2020. Yeah, 2020. So they're like building early, and then Bitfinex and Tether have been very important partners to El Salvador. So this is it's kind of like a boutique startup nation. So we get to like hand pick the people that we want here, because that we know for being so old as we are and being around forever. That's what I always tell people when like, oh man, I wish I were around in 2011. And I was like, then you'd be as old as I am. So then maybe you wouldn't want to be around. But no, the fact that we've known, like we know the people that survived all the bear markets and especially the boom markets. Those are the hardest ones to survive with your integrity intact. So we've individually bringing every one of those sort of people and companies here. So I just think that's also built such a first mover advantage. And speaking of moats, like it's going to be hard for any other country to replicate what we have, because President Bukele is like a 1 in 500 year sort of leader. So you have to have another one of those happen somewhere on Earth. And then you have to have, the builders. And so most people in this space are plunderers, like in the crypto space are plunderers. And you see that in other places like Puerto Rico, I mentioned. They don't build anything, but we only want builders here. And I think we have a room of builders here.
Well, I remember, 2 years ago, 18 months ago, Stacy and I would kind of, have lunch and talk and, and say, if we were putting together a dream team of the best Bitcoiners in the world, who would we invite for this? And we reached out, and they came. And I think the results speak for themselves. So this is what we really have been able to bring to the table, is we've been around a while, and we have met everybody in this space. We know pretty much where all the bodies are buried and who's doing actual work. And so we used our Rolodex, which is a technology from the 1970s. I don't know if anyone remembers the Rolodex, but to give you an idea of how old I am.
It's like 4 people.
Let's hear it. Go boomers. Boomers for Bitcoin. Is it still 3,000? Go back to bed, Grandpa. Okay, so, and we were successful. Yep.
That's great. I agree. There are so many builders here. We're all optimistic. We're all optimistic on the future. Despite that, what do you think is the biggest threat, and how can we build and improve to mitigate those threats and give the best possible outcome in the future?
The only threat is that, I take a vacation and I'm not there to beat the shit out of some shitcoiner that shows up at the airport. No, I just believe that once people taste not only the freedom, the liberty, the good times, the strong men create the good times. I think we're still we're at that phase where strong men creating good times. And the bad times are so just recent here. They're not going to allow the plunderers in, the scammers in, and stuff like that, because they're like, dude, We just came out of 50 years of that. Go plunder Puerto Rico. I keep on bringing up Puerto Rico because I know a lot of shitcoiners there.
Yeah, I think that, the threat would be, let's have a civil war. No, we had that already. The threat would be, let's have a gang war. No, we just had that, right? So that they've come out of the threats. They've come out of the dark ages, and it's really a sense of liberation. I mean, I remember those photos after World War II of Liberation Day, Victory in Europe Day, and people in the streets kissing and dancing. And that's really the feeling you get, and people have been liberated. They can actually go outside of their homes. A story I heard a guy say that before Bukele, my house was too small, now my house is too big. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, before Bukele, when the gangs ran the country, we never left our house, and we never had enough room. Now, after Bukele, the gangs are gone, and nobody's home. They're all outside. My house is too big. And so these are the types of stories you hear every single day. People are, actually what's amazing is that the transformation has been so fast. One of the biggest groups of folks that are in disbelief are Salvadorans themselves, who can't believe that they're actually able to walk safely. And you see them down in the Historic Center and other areas of the country just luxuriating in the freedom of walking without being threatened, which is something everyone in the U.S. has taken for granted, and it shows. We've become a bit too decadent, and it's not working in the U.S.
In the last few moments here, too, I also want to point out the builders that are homegrown, the Salvadoran builders, and you've all seen them. We've gone to a few conferences over the past year. We went to Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, and then we went to Pacific Bitcoin, and then Lugano. And with us, we had the ASO Bitcoin arranged, the El Salvador, Bitcoin country tourism booth, and you saw the Salvadoran builders. You saw people like K1, Tianki, Chorito Cafe. So there's a domestic startup population, startup culture developing here as well. So these are first generation, like this is the early stage at 2011, 2012 of Bitcoin being back then, and the same thing is happening here. So you're starting to see a startup culture in El Salvador itself. So I think that's great, because I think it would have been bad news if it was just all the Westerners arriving here, the gringos arriving here with their jobs or their companies, but they're building stuff here as well. So that's amazing to see.
Yep. So there's still more work to be done, right? There's still more things to happen.
Yes, come to El Salvador.
Yep.
We need more builders here. It helps us.
Definitely.
Because the more the more good people. If you're a bad person, stay the fuck away. Okay, don't come here. Nobody's here.
Well, thank you guys very much. It's very encouraging to be here and see it. Not just to trust the news, but to verify that it's happening and it's here and people are loving it. So thank you for all you've done. Thank you.
This fundamental technological flaw that up to this point in history we've not been able to figure out yet. To me, those are the only two ways in which these things end, and I think history speaks to that very well. That either we keep creating, well then yeah, theoretically we all should only perpetually get richer and richer with a higher and higher degree of prosperity perpetually into the future. A million sats, 100,000 sats, maybe even less than 100,000 sats could be significant amounts of money. What happens to the world if 100 million lives are saved purely just from reducing energy costs slightly from adopting a new monetary system? And then really appreciate that you take your time from all the wonderful events to be here. Is this your first time in El Salvador? It's my first time. Great, okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I'm assuming you all love it too. Yeah, so my talk today is about Bitcoin aligning incentives. So I talk about a lot of things online, mostly Bitcoin, of course, lots of different vantage points, perspectives, hopefully many of them interesting, but today's a little different, I suppose. And I suppose I'm doing that because here in El Salvador, I feel that this is something that's especially touching to where we are. It's especially touching to where we are in this moment in history, or at least I think so. And I think it's really important to talk about. So what I've really enjoyed about being here in El Salvador so much thus far is just the beauty, natural beauty, the food, the people, the culture. Obviously, the last 2 days we've been stuck in this hotel, but I spent a few days in El Zante. We're going there later tonight again. So I've really loved it.
And to me, it emphasizes that the things that we really value in life are not the numbers that we call money. They're not the number of units or currency or whatever. It's the stuff that is what we use to consume. It's what we use to eat. It's our time. It's our family and our loved ones. And so to me, that's the hope with Bitcoin. It's not just a new series of numbers, but that it can help enable more of that prosperity, more of that absolute purchasing power. So I'm going to compare fiat and Bitcoin, why I think Bitcoin's set of numbers is more moral and more fair and more equal. So essentially, if we all want those things, if we all want that prosperity for ourselves, for our future selves, for our children, we all want to be able to communicate those numbers and communicate to each other what is valuable to us, right? It's the way in which we communicate what's valuable to each other. And so obviously barter was the main system in which we did that until obviously then we had to find a way to have an increased amount of scarcity in order to communicate what is relatively abundant in terms of that. And so what we did, my example here, what we did is we created political currency. I've got a $100 US bill and 100 Venezuelan bolivars, right? So these are political currencies. These are sets of numbers, ones and zeros, and I would argue that this is a technological innovation. A lot of Bitcoiners, think that this is, evil and, dust or whatever, worthless, and I agree, but at the same time, this is, in my opinion, a technological innovation. This is better than just going out and bartering and hoping that we have, coincidence of once that we want the same thing. And so this is what we had for a very, very long period of time. We have to have something that's more abstract and more scarce than things in real life. And so the only thing more scarce than things in our real life are numbers. And so what we do is we create a board of people or an individual or group of individuals that creates a set of numbers, and they say, these are the numbers that are scarce, right? And we trade those for the things that we actually care about. It's not the numbers, it's the things we actually care about. And so my coming to Bitcoin journey, let's say, my understanding of Bitcoin was really realizing that this is an innovation, yes, in comparison to the past or hunter-gatherer days, farming days, and all that, but it's really archaic. It really has this fundamental technological flaw that up to this point in history we've not been able to figure out yet. And that is the problem of conflicting interests. And that's what I believe Bitcoin solves, which I'll get to in a minute. But the problem here is that if you have an entity, if you have a group of people that are defending the scarcity of these numbers, well then simultaneously you've created two different classes, two different tiers. You have the people that are the creators and the managers and the distributors of the numbers, and then you have the users of the numbers, everyone else. And so inherently, fundamentally, built into the technological system itself, you have these two competing forces that are always going to be in conflict with each other perpetually into the future. The people, I'm an American, obviously. How many of you are Americans in here, right? That you actually use dollars? Okay, yeah, so a good number of you. So for me, for example, I'm over here in America with my American political currency units, my ones and zeros that we create. I'm very close to the creators of our numbers. And then I come down here to El Salvador. There's many of you Americans, lots of people here from Europe, a few of you from Asia, all over the world coming down here. And our numbers are worth more here. So that is essentially a form of theft, right? In that I am a perpetrator of this theft, and I'm also a victim, because I'm not the one that creates the numbers. I'm not the very foundation or choke point. So I am both a victim and a perpetrator, right? And I think that's how we all are, that we don't have an alternate set of numbers because this is the best we have, or it's the best we've had up to this point. And so if I think, when I was thinking about, okay, where does this all lead? Where does this go? To me, I looked at history and it became clear that, we keep getting to the same end result. We keep coming to the similar, very limited set of outcomes that seem basically inevitable. And I would argue because it's a systemic flaw in the technology. If I am on the side of creating the numbers and distributing the numbers, and you are on the side of receiving the numbers, well then inherently there's only one of two ways this can end, right? Either I keep creating more numbers and I can no longer acquire your stuff, or we bring out the guns, because that's really what backs the money. That's really what backs it. If you have a central group of power enforcing the scarcity of those numbers, what defends that? It's the barrel of a gun, right? So to me, those are the only two ways in which these things end. And I think history speaks to that very well. That either we keep creating the numbers perpetually, hyperinflation, or we no longer agree on those numbers and we resort to war. We resort to the energy that backs those numbers, which is the barrel of a gun. So I look at where we are today, I think about myself as an American and all of us as Americans in here. We come from America over 80 years. We've had the dominant series in numbers in the world, like many others before us. But simultaneously, we know that they also trend to bolivars over time. The only question is timing, right? If I am perpetually incentivized to create these numbers, then my incentive is not in the best interest of your incentive. And so, to me, when I look at that problem, I think, okay, most people are attributing these tensions and these misalignments and these failures of misaligned incentive structures, they're attributing it to conspiracy theories or to bad politicians or the system or the courts or this country or that country or this or that. And while that's all true, and perhaps at varying degrees of correctness, I think it's a much more fundamental problem. I think fundamentally, the reason why Bitcoiners are so passionate about Bitcoin is because they understand that this is not a Republican or Democrat or a communist versus a fascist or democracy or monarchy. These are all different manifestations of the same technological problem. We've not had a way to distribute numbers that we call money in an effective way where there's no central point in control. And so I think it's fundamentally a technological problem, which is much more subtle and much more nuanced than just wanting to blame a different ethnicity or a different country or a different politician or the person or the group that you don't like. I think it's more subtle than that, but I think it's far more concerning and far more devastating because of the inevitability of it. It's just game theory. It's just fundamental base layer reality. It's not some lever that can just be pulled in your direction. Now everything's magically fixed from the top down. It's a fundamental technological failure from the bottom up. And that's why I think Bitcoin's really important. Because I think there are only two solutions. Like I said before, this ends in one of two results, either hyperinflation or war. But I think there's only one of two solutions. The first solution is all humans become moral, right? All humans become without sin. All humans have perfect hearts forever in time, right? Kumbaya, right? So basically, we have a group of people in charge of the numbers, and we all say, we're never going to increase the number of currency units. I'm never going to pretend that I'm a monetary god and create numbers out of thin air in exchange for your real goods, your real services, and your real labor at my direct benefit, at your direct expense. That's theft, right? And so that's not going to happen, right? Everyone obviously knows that that's not going to happen. So the only other possible solution, because we're in that fallen world, the only other possible solution I can conceive of is finding a technological improvement to this. In the same way that fiat currency, aka by decree, with the barrelable gun, of course, fiat is an innovation on barter, but likewise, the only solution to this technological problem, in my view, is finding a technological solution, and that's Bitcoin. The cypherpunks and the computer geeks would call it the double spend problem. Economists would call it a different problem. We can call it whatever we want, but fundamentally, I think Bitcoin is a technological fix to this technological problem. Because now, as an American, right now, my incentive with my political currency is to acquire it as fast as possible, as soon as it's minted, as soon as it's created, faster than the kids here in El Salvador, right? We've gone out, we've gone to the beaches, we've gone around town the last few days here, we've met lots of locals. My incentive is right now to be as close to that money printer as possible. And so I don't really care from a incentive game theory perspective. I don't really care what their incentive is because it's not necessarily aligned. And so I believe the only way to remedy that, the only way to fix that, the only way to work together in that sense is to have that technological solution at which there's not the currency creators and the currency users, but instead everyone is a user and no one is a creator. Likewise Satoshi, I don't think was divine. I don't think was, some person any more moral than any of us, but I think Satoshi had a vision, and his vision was, we create a system that makes the numbers, and there's no human that can control it, that can distort it or debase it in the future. And so, including himself. And we saw that with the block size wars, of course, Bitcoin's own trying to destroy it. But all that to say is that to me is what is so meaningful about being here. That's why I'm so passionate about being here. I think for so many of you, that's what's so exciting. And so for me personally, when I think about why I'm here because I love it. I enjoy it, right? I get to network. Hopefully, this increases my reputation. People are, recording this. Hopefully people watch it online. It's in my self-interest to come to these events and to talk and to share my perspectives and my message and hopefully get more eyeballs of me and my content and my name. But simultaneously, I believe it's good for others because I'm helping others when I'm here. We're having dinners and doing business deals and thinking about things and creating ideas. And likewise, I have friends I come here and I visit and I hang out with. And so from a friendship perspective, I really love it and enjoy it. And likewise, because I'm bringing my numbers, because I'm bringing my purchasing power here, as little as it may be, aggregated out to the hundreds and hundreds of us here for a week or more, like that's a real impact on the local economy. And so when I think of myself, why I'm so passionate or obsessed about Bitcoin is because I think for me on a personal level, there are so many layers of that incentive alignment that keep me passionate and keep me always perpetually interested. Because yes, it's in my own best interest, my own self-interest to stack as many sats as possible, as it is for all of you, to make as much money as possible, to increase your own purchasing power as much as possible. But the beauty with knowing that the system that the children here in El Salvador are now using, or are hopefully going to increasingly be using, is not going to steal from them in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, then you realize, wait a second, now me also come here is not just my own self-interest of wanting to enjoy the beautiful weather here, but it's also in the interest of them, knowing that what I'm doing, hopefully, is bringing better economic opportunities for them, both in the present and the future. Which then gets back to my own self-interest, because if I know that they're not going to be stolen from, well then, when my kids or my grandkids come along, what if some invention, discovery, or innovation that the kids here make eventually impacts my kids? And we don't have that with Fiat, because our incentive right now as Americans, and this is not an anti-American stance, again, it's a technological problem, is that we have a higher degree of wealth and purchasing power than the rest of the world. And so because we have that, we have the bigger gun, therefore we get to decree the numbers, we get to make the numbers. So we give our currency units here, we dilute their currency in exchange for some of their purchasing power, for some of their labor, and some of their wealth disproportionately their direct expense. And so then our pile gets a little bit bigger. And so it gets bigger and bigger. We have a greater ability to create. So we don't have that. But that is what's so exciting about me being here and being able to see that and being able to enjoy that in person. And so for me, that's what keeps me up at night. That's what keeps me excited. And that's what keeps me really optimistic. Knowing that, if there's 21 million Bitcoin, which we know there's 21 million Bitcoin, then, and there's 5 billion adults in the world, 200 million of those adults is 4% of the world population. You just aggregate the math out, and pretty much everyone here at this conference, we know if they buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, self-custody Bitcoin properly for a long enough time horizon, well then yeah, theoretically we all should only perpetually get richer and richer with a higher and higher degree of prosperity perpetually into the future. 1 million sats, 100,000 sats, maybe even less than 100,000 sats could be significant amounts of money in the future. But the beauty is that, yeah, sure, we're all here to get rich, but at the same time, we don't get rich unless we also help our neighbors get rich, unless we also help them get rich, unless we help them prosper in the future. And so aligning those incentives with the monetary network that inherently doesn't have that fundamental issue, I think is a really big deal, both for us, for our neighbors, for the world's poorest people, 500 million, 600, 800 million or so, less than a billion, that's for sure, people in the world have property rights. And so I look at this from a futurist or a technologist perspective, and I think it's taken us 4,000 years to get to 500 million people with property rights. What if this digital magic internet money, this simply slightly different numerical system, also money, but a different incentive structure, what if this could onboard the next 2 billion people, the next 3 billion people, perhaps even 5 billion people or more to having property rights? Essentially, what if we could 10x the number of humans innovating and discovering and creating in the future? I think that's a wonderful and a beautiful thing. And I think that that is the bullish case for Bitcoin. It's not saying, oh, Bitcoin's going to $10 million, $100 million in terms of these, right? Because these dollars, as we all know, trend to the bolivars, right? That's the incentive. And so we know that humans will always follow their incentives and they'll always trend towards that. And so to me, that's the bullish case for Bitcoin. It's not that, oh, it's going to be a perpetually higher price in terms of a numerical system that's perpetually worth less and less, but it's that, what if we could 10x the number of productive humans, 10x the amount of intelligence, 10x the amount of people that are prospering on this planet, and then have more and more innovations that contribute to that? And I think that's really true. On the negative side, like I'm saying with Fiat, I create the numbers, I distribute the numbers. One of only two end results is hyperinflation or war, right? And as many of you have probably heard before, but I think it's worth saying again, is that 98% of the nations, empires, or systems that had hit 130% sovereign debt to GDP end in hyperinflation, default, or war within 15 years, right? And America hit that 3 years ago. So obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that everything comes crumbling down in any specific timeline, but my point is that if we know this is a technological problem, and we know this is an incentive structure problem, and we know that humans will always follow that incentive structure, and we know that 98% of the time that we've hit these markers that we hit 3 years ago, that the game ends in a relatively short period of time after that, to me it becomes really urgent as to why Bitcoin needs to be talked about, why Bitcoin needs to be adopted, and why Bitcoin is a sponge for everyone to direct their resources to. If I'm the printer of currency, well now I can, instead of printing and dumping my currency onto the users, I can just exchange it in acquiring Bitcoin and let that be the infinite sponge that soaks up my infinite currency. Or likewise, if I'm the people, the victims, the users that are being stolen from day after day after day, well now I don't necessarily have to rise up with my guns and begin a conflict. I can just opt out peacefully, non-violently, into something that can actually preserve my property rights without the need of bullets and bandages. And so I think both for the victims and the perpetrators, I think for everyone across the planet, this is the most urgent way in which to divert that tension that's rising and rising and rising atop fiat currency, divert that attention over. And so that's a little doom and gloom, it's a little negative, but in a more positive sense, I think about energy. 4.6 million people every year freeze to death needlessly because energy costs keep going up perpetually. And they will only continue to keep going up perpetually because we'll always demand to save our credit markets, right? And so I look at that and I think, what if just 10% of those preventable losses of life are prevented from a monetary system that doesn't have that technological exploit, where humans can leverage that system to steal and destroy the wealth of others? I mean, that's what, 500,000 people a year, 460,000 people a year? Aggregate that over 100 years, that's 46 million people, and that's just 10%. If we're looking at 20, 22%, something like that, compounded out, what happens to the world if 100 million lives are saved purely just from reducing energy costs slightly from adopting a new monetary system? And then you have the food, then you have the education, then you have the defunding of tyrannies and terrorists and dictatorships, all those things in the future. But even just 100 million people, that's a profound impact. That's a massive amount of opportunity and wealth brought to Africa, to Latin America, to Asia, to the whole world, including the West, including America. That's very profound to me, and it's very moving to me. And that's why I'm thrilled to be here to talk about Bitcoin, share my thoughts. I meet so many great Bitcoiners. I've met so many people that are building businesses here and investing. And it's like, again, it's about aligning incentives. Yes, they're here for profit. Yes, they're here, they want to make money. Yes, they're here because they want to get rich and increase their purchasing power. But they're also creating jobs. They're also improving their environments, improving housing conditions. And so, to me, that's the beauty of Bitcoin. That's why I'm here. I hope that's why you're all here. And so I suppose my message and my encouragement for you all is to really embrace that your desire to profit atop a system that only benefits those that in a free market bring value to other people. To me, that's really exciting. And I think we've lost that a lot with political money, with fiat currency, because profiting, not always, but very often, is a result of directly harvesting wealth from someone else or indirectly harvesting wealth from someone else. And because Bitcoin doesn't have that exploit, to me, that's my encouragement, to go out, build businesses, bring value, talk about Bitcoin, share it with others, and simultaneously feel encouraged that if you're doing the right thing, if you're doing the moral thing, if you're treating your fellow neighbor as yourself and you're loving them, then you are very probably going to profit, and they are too, and which then benefits your kids. And ultimately, that's what it's about. That's why I'm here. It's not about me acquiring more numbers. It's the whole reason we do this, the whole reason we save money is for our kids, is it not? It's for our future. And so, in my view, the best way to help our kids and help our grandkids is to help, in the future, is to help the kids of today and other places in the world that have been much less fortunate to us. So that's why I care about Bitcoin. That's why I'm passionate about it. And I'm really glad to see you all here. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Bitcoin is incredible, and it's incredibly important, which is why it means a lot that you're watching this video and you're taking the time. I do this because I believe it is a really, really important innovation that we've discovered a way to not have a single point of failure at global base layer money. See, fiat money, political currency units, and gold, all other forms of money up to this point in history have had a single point of failure. This has been the largest monetary problem in human history for the last 4,000 years. And now we have Bitcoin, and Bitcoin solves that single point of failure problem. And now, therefore, we have a new single point of failure problem, and that is how do we custody and store that Bitcoin properly for the long term in a safe and secure way that brings peace of mind. That's why I work at the Bitcoin Advisor. If you were to be hit by a bus, does your spouse, do your kids, do your loved ones and beneficiaries know how to access your Bitcoin? Do you have a proper self-custody storage method to where there is no single point of failure? Not from yourself, not from your seed device, not from where your seed phrase is stored. Have you considered these questions? Have you gotten your UTXOs managed? Do you have jurisdictional arbitrage? Have you considered all the trust, taxes, and estate planning requirements that are associated with becoming a high net worth person? Because if you are buying Bitcoin right now, you are going to become a high net worth person. Are you prepared for the amount of Bitcoin you have to skyrocket in value 2x, 5x, 10x, or 100x eventually? That's the time horizon you should have. And so you need to be preparing today for that future. How are you going to custody your Bitcoin? How are you going to leave that Bitcoin for your future generations? Because after all, that's what we do this for, right? You're buying Bitcoin for your kids. You're buying it for your grandkids. And so I highly recommend you start thinking in those long-term time periods now, because companies are coming, charities are coming, high net worth individuals are coming, and all of them are going to realize that having an allocation to a multi-sig collateral custody vault is going to be something that is of serious consideration for them. So once you understand Bitcoin is a beautiful innovation for not having a single point of failure at the base layer currency, now you have to start seriously considering, how do I have my custody stored where there is no single point of failure? Okay, if you want to learn more about that, please click the link in the description. I have dozens of pages of free educational content for you and videos. I'm happy to help in that free way. And then if you want individual help, I'm also happy to help you join the Bitcoin Advisor, where you can be an ongoing client. You can become one of my clients, and I'd be happy to help you in the years to come to make sure your Bitcoin's protected, to where no matter what, no matter if thieves or scammers or spammers or yourself or your family or whoever, no matter whether it's due to theft or loss, misallocation, misplacement, or just other mistakes, I'm happy to help you and be that voice of reason in the coming years ahead. So click the link in the description. I'd be happy to help. Check it out. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, we've got like 5 minutes for questions or so. I don't know what you would want to ask me, but I'm happy to share my thoughts.
Do you have any idea across what kind of time frame realistically that Bitcoin might reach what could be called mass adoption, or in some kind of realistic way that would begin to impact some of the things that you just talked about in terms of the global benefits that it would bring?
Well, I think in one sense it's already happening. I mean, if you're on a Bitcoin standard today, you're already reaping the benefits of the future today. It's like, I'm on a Bitcoin standard, like the collapse of fiat doesn't necessarily impact me. Obviously it does, but at the same time it doesn't, because I'm with Bitcoin, like in my social layer, I'm with Bitcoiners, in my personal monetary layer, like in my worldview, everything is already collapsing. My housing costs, my energy costs, my food, like, so for me, the future is already now, right? And so I think in many ways it's already here. But yeah, globally, I think it'll take a long time. I think most people will have to learn through pain. You know, I mean, we could see Argentina or Lebanon. You know, yeah, they're having higher rates of adoption, or even here in El Salvador. You know, this is a real example here. Is that there's a greater amount of economic pain here than, you know, in Michigan, where I'm from, and so adoption is accelerating here compared to there, but still it's nowhere near 100%. So I think it'll take a long time, but yeah, I think it'll take a long time. So. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you narrow down?
Oh. Yeah.
Can you narrow it down to the United States? You think it's going to be by states, or the adoption is going to be with all of them? What do you think?
Do I think what's going to be by state?
The adoption of it.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I mean, I talked to some guys from North Carolina. Like, there's some states leapfrogging other states. You know, North Carolina, Texas, and a few others are leapfrogging California and New York. But I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know. I think the Robert Kennedy and the other presidential candidates, I think it's really interesting, not because, you know, I'm idolizing a politician, but like, it's already being stated in presidential candidates that by president, like, what if we back our treasuries with Bitcoin? Like, that's a really big deal. It's like, if I'm the creator of currency, why don't I just create more of my political currency units, more of my numbers, acquire the Bitcoin, use the Bitcoin to back my currency? It's essentially what Michael Saylor did with his stock. Dump as much of your own stock as you can, acquire Bitcoin. And so it's like, so I think it's very interesting, because I think that's like hyperbolic adoption there, at least in the nation states. So yeah, I don't know.
If the incentives are so much different with the dollar compared to Bitcoin, and we build civilization on top of that incentive structure, does everything have to trickle down does everything have to crumble down before everything starts to get built up on new infrastructure for those people?
I think it'll bifurcate. I think it'll be like two different worlds. Like I think we already feel it because like at these events, everyone's happy, everyone's positive, everyone, you know, there's so many different political, religious, and philosophical worldviews in this room even and across the conference. It's like we have such a different mentality, in my opinion, than the rest of the world. I think that's only going to get more and more extreme. For everyone that's not in Bitcoin, housing will only become more expensive perpetually forever. Same with food, same with energy, same with education, same with everything else. And likewise in Bitcoin, I think it'll just get better. So I think yes, but I don't think it's going to be like the whole world collapses and the whole world builds back up. I think it's going to be like two different worldviews, right? I mean, the same thing with the internet, right? You had the people that adopted the internet where everything got better and better and better for them with more and more opportunities. And then you had the other world, the ancient world, that just eventually dissolved until, you know, nobody paid attention anymore, right? So
How do you reduce the dependency on the US dollar, like, and the way it benefits some? How can you do that in maths?
well, the brutal truth is that, like I said, I mean, I view all of us as actively, you know, I have dollars in my bank account. I'm spending dollars here. It's like I'm keeping that system alive. You know, we all are. But at the same time, it's reducing that as much as possible and increasing my Bitcoin energy savings and attention as much as possible, right? Because I think for every person individually and the world as a whole, it's not going to be a overnight switch. I think it's going to be gradual. So that's just me.
My biggest worry, this is gonna sound dumb, is that the price goes up so high, so rapidly, that it's not gonna be distributed enough among the people that need it the most. And in this cycle that we're seeing the big boys come in, the ETFs and the Wall Street people, and then the people who really need it the most are gonna be kind of left out, or are gonna be buying Bitcoin at a price that they're not gonna be able to enjoy the benefits that we talked about, or at a lesser extent had they bought at the current price. I don't know what you think.
No, I think it's a legitimate concern. I think my perspective of that would be that if you're operating within Bitcoin, the only way to acquire more Bitcoin is either to buy it, or farther and farther in the future we go, it'll be more and more so the only way is to provide value to someone else, right? With political currency, right? Again, either I create the numbers and I steal from you indirectly, or we settle this with guns and I steal from you directly, right? But with Bitcoin, even if it is highly centralized, I think that over time it will naturally become more and more decentralized, because if I have a significant amount of Bitcoin and I want stuff in the world, the only way for me to do that is to spend my Bitcoin, which then naturally distributes it. And so, I mean, yeah, it could be argued that's a theory and it's too far in the future to picture that. But I mean, I look at the last 14 years, you know, and it's only become more and more equalized, more and more decentralized. And so I think if we can go from the average person buying 10,000 Bitcoin in a single transaction to 1% or 2% of a coin, it's like, I think it'll just continue from there. At least that's my hope. I think it will.
And I hope they suppress price. I actually hope that, because the more they suppress price with fake paper ETF Bitcoin, the more affordable Bitcoin is for all of us, the real
Stackers, you know, decentralize it faster, which then ironically, you know, accelerates adoption, in my opinion. So, okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.